Don't stop playing, guys. Hi, welcome to Guitar Talk. Keep going, guys, keep going. Today's episode, last time we had 2 note chords, and if you listen to my friend Mr. Mark Armstrong, to my left, you're right, he's using a lot of triads, 3 note chords in his section here as the melodic line. And to my right is Mr. Ken Unak, a very supportive player, if I may say so. Welcome to Triads.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Armstrong.
Okay. So this is a kind of a continuation of last week's intervals. Because as I was putting the interval show together last week, I realized, there was a big step we had kind of jumped over, which is the triads, which is probably for me the main way I look at the guitar. I organize mostly around triads. Even the smaller shapes, I just also realized too, one thing I'm always fascinated with the smaller shapes is how one shape can become lots of different things. You can take a third and make it different parts of a chord, like we were talking about putting it in context.
Right.
With the triads, I realized this is actually the thing that I have written in stone. That this is not variable. This is like there's just these pictures on the guitar that I organize around. And the reason I really like the triads is because ultimately there's only 4 kinds of triads. And if you do them the way I have them here, which is on closed position, there's only 12 shapes. And actually a lot of them start to look the same after a while when you get on different sets of strings. So it's a finite set of things that you can organize around. And you can start to see how a lot of things are similar. You start to see like, if I change this one note here, 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 you can start to get more organic with how you're creating chords.
Well, why don't you just give a quick, a little bit of an example.
So here is an example. So if I take a C chord, and so this is the whole concept of inversions, which is like what are inversions? An inversion is where you take a chord. In this case, we're going to take a C chord, C, E, and G, which is, I'm taking the first note, the third note, and the 5th note of the scale, and stacking them on top of each other.
Yeah.
And that's the beginning of where our harmony comes from. So if I take that and I start putting those notes in different orders, so that I can play them on different places on the guitar, that's the concept of inversions. So if I take, so I'm going to do this all on the top 3 strings. So if I take those 3 notes, C, E, and G, I can play a G, a C, and an E as the lowest of that I can play on the top 3 strings. Then I can go up to here, C, E, G, and I have the next inversion of it.
Right.
And then I go up to here, E, G, and C, and that's the what's called the first inversion, but the next inversion. And then we got up here, and we're up an octave from where we started.
So if I may interject, in the triad that you're working with, root position would be the first, where it would be C, E, and G.
Correct.
So what we're doing is we're changing the order of the sequence. So instead of 1, 3, 5, now we're 3, 5, and 1.
Right,
so
exactly.
1 would be C, 3 would be E, 5 would be the G.
Right, and that's 3, 5, and 1.
There's
and
3,
then,
5,
and then
and 1,
this is 5, 1, and 3.
3.
Right, exactly. So you start to sit there and say, okay, that's really nice. I got all these chords I can play all over the neck. What's the value of it, right?
True.
Is it just to show off, hey, I know a lot of chords all over the neck, which is one thing I think some people actually do. But anyway, so the idea is this, is that one thing that people lose sight of in chords, especially because of the way we're taught them as pictures and you just strum all the strings and all this stuff, is the idea that there's a melody going with that chord. There's a top note of that chord, which we perceive as a melody. As a matter of fact, in general, the notes that we hear strongest in chords are the outside notes, the bass and then the top, the treble. Yep. The only time we usually hear inside notes is if there's movement or dissonance. So if I do this, you're hearing those notes really strong. But if I do this, oh, wait a minute, there's a dissonance. All of a sudden your ear is drawn into that little dissonance, right? Or if I do this, if I do some movement in the middle of all of a sudden your ear is drawn to that. But in general, we tend to hear the outside notes. So the idea is then that, I started thinking about this and I started realizing, well, wait a minute. if I can just harmonize scales with these triads, then what I can do is combine the scale way of thinking, which is basically what you're doing when you're soloing, creating melodies, but support them with chords so that there's a harmonic underpinning to the melodies. So in that sense, what we have then is we have those triads up the neck, then the C, and I also have a C scale on that same string.
Yeah.
Okay? So if I start to combine those two things, what I can do very simply is I can play the chord, and then just on the top string replace the next note for the chord tone that's below it. And then go up here, and then do the same thing. Now this one, when you see the page, you'll see there's a triplet figure here because essentially there's 3 notes associated with this little form.
Yeah.
Then we come up here, and then we got that, and we can add the next note of the scale, and finally we're back to where we started. And we can do that. So what does all this mean? So if I'm playing a melody, I can start to immediately harmonize it.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
And so that is a very handy little game, and I'm seeing this very visually. And I'm seeing all these little shapes on the neck. So let's now go to another step, which is, I think, the best place to start this is on these 3 strings, the DGB strings.
Okay.
Okay? I have found that, for one, I've seen a lot of music where triads are being played on these set of strings.
Yep.
They have meat to them. The high E string sometimes is very thin sounding, and so this carries more weight. Also, what's really cool about this is the major chords with the fingerings, actually the physical way of playing this. So if I take a C chord, I've got a straight across fingering for it.
Yep.
Isn't that handy, right? What does that do? It frees up 3 fingers to do a lot of other things.
Right.
So that's a
And
great
4 chord.
Right, exactly. All sorts of things. Now the other 2, we've got this C and this C. Now watch this. If I just take these 2 fingers and switch them back and forth, my first and second fingers, those are the 2 forms. So I go from here to here. Again, very easy to switch between these 2 chords.
Oh, right.
Because you're just switching those 2 fingers around, back and forth. So physically, this is actually a really easy game to play. Now, I will mention one little thing about, again, the physical aspect, the playing of it. If you're going to pluck it and you're going to play fingerstyle, then it doesn't really matter, whether you're worrying about muting so much or not. If you're going to strum these chords, which you can do, now you have to be much more conscious of muting.
Right.
So if I'm strumming these chords, I have to be conscious of always hugging the A string and somehow muting the
Right. Right.
So you got to get into that little game, but that's it's just not that hard to get that.
No.
So,
and then a lot of strummers will, although this is usually an open G, but you take something like,
right.
Well,
how about this one?
Right. Right.
Free ride.
And
there's tons of good lovin', all that stuff. All that stuff. Okay, so now let's now take it to the next step. Now the next step would be taking it to the F chord, and again, a lot of this is arbitrary. So we have. So if you notice, this is the one I'm really presenting as not only notation, tablature notation, but also as visual. And so one thing I found is just staring at these visual sheets that I have, the 1 major, the 4 major, the 5 major. One thing you start to realize is you're dealing with all the same notes, right? So the idea is that if you can see this as notes that you're imposing patterns over, it's a lot easier than trying to remember all these different permutations. So if you see the scale, so that's kind of that first step of learning to play on the single strings and learning to see the scale. And seeing to see it as just a bunch of notes and not as all these little positions.
Right.
But then again, the patterns, like I said, the patterns in this case really help out. So what we'll now do is take that same thing, and we'll that same scale, except I'm going to do it on the these three strings. We're just doing the D, G, B. So we got C, D, E. So we got the C scale here. But now I'm going to harmonize it with an F chord. Right?
Oh, nice.
How different it sounds compared.
Wow.
Right? Just by how. Right? So you get two different ways of harmonizing the exact same bunch of notes. And again, there's also, like, you know.
And you're still only using this shape, the straight shape. So could you do the harmonization on the F and just go through the shapes a little bit?
So it's just the straight one across,
Yeah.
or the angled one. And then we switch them. You switch those two fingers, the first and second fingers. So this is at the 5th fret. So you got 7, 6, 5, 7, 5, 6. And then the other shape is the
flat, yeah.
Yep. And then finally we're back to where we started, up an octave at the 13th fret. Yep.
Nice.
Yep. And
Again, only the same three shapes.
Yes, exactly. So so again, we have different ways. So again, you can start playing little melodies, you know, and you can support them.
Right.
And don't forget, all these are starting points. This isn't the only thing you get to do or have to do or anything. I mean, it's just this is just exploring.
Now, can I ask a question?
Yep.
When you harmonize the C scale with F, is that Lydian?
Yes. Yes, exactly. It's F Lydian. So now we're dealing with the idea of the modes, which is once we start hearing a major scale or any scale with different roots than what we're taught as the root of the scale, we're getting into the concept of modes. Right. And really, modes, I mean, to me, the way I understand modes is a mode is a separate scale. Is, you know, G Mixolydian and C major or C Ionian have the same notes by accident. They're totally separate sounds, and if you try to always homogenize it, you get dizzy. And then obviously there's slop over because they do compare, you know, they have all the same notes. But it's easier in a lot of ways to look at them as all unique things, and they just so happen to be playing a bunch of the same notes at the same time.
Sure.
Yep. So now let's take this and put this into the blues. If we take and do G Mixolydian, now we're going to get our dominant chord, all right?
Oh, nice.
Okay, yeah, all right. So now, if we take the G, so we can start with the basic G, which is the open DGB strings. Yes, and then we put the C on top for the sus. Then we get the G. All right.
Right.
So now. So now this is how to do the harmony. So the Mixolydian sound, which is one of the main sounds of the blues that we've been looking at.
So you could use them, simply do the whole blues right here. If Mark was going to be playing lead and stuff, I can hang around on these little triads.
Right.
Back to a...
And then we go to the G. Now also, by the way, that's good voice leading. You know, this is another little concept that guitarists tend to ignore in the scheme of things. You know, pianists are always thinking about this.
Right.
You know, voice leading. Composers are always thinking about this. Guitarists go, I just play the shape and I move it here. But the principles of voice leading is the idea of you're trying to move to a chord with the minimal amount of movements.
Right.
So if I'm doing this and I go from C to an F, well, there has a note that's common between those two chords.
Right.
If I keep that note in the same voice, meaning on the same string, it's going to be moving the least amount of distance as opposed to moving like this or, you know, which is moving everything. And the same thing going to the...
Excuse me, sorry.
It's okay. Sorry. That's okay. So then the other way is going to the G. I have a G in both of those chords.
Right.
And that's what that. So again, that's moving the minimal amount of distance. So also on these sheets, I do acknowledge that because the colors of the sheets are the voice-led chords.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So that's I organize it that way too. Okay. So now, once we have this idea of the Mixolydian, now we have to know a few more changes of notes. We have to know a little more of the scales we're playing. But if we put it into a C blues now, we can use Mixolydian on all three of the chords, the C chord, the F chord, and the G chord, instead of the Ionian, Lydian, right?
Which would make it country.
Right, exactly. So now we're going to get this, you know.
Okay.
Yep.
Can we hear that against maybe Mr.
Sure.
Unek playing the backup?
Yeah,
So
sure.
I'm going to play these little ones.
You can play. Actually,
Or
why
I
don't
should
why
play-
don't you play the fuller chords for now?
Okay.
And then we can switch and see what you.
All right, now switch.
Yeah, that's great.
I don't know if I can do anything other than that.
You want to try it or not? It's up to you.
I can do it in A.
Okay, we'll do it now. We'll do it in A. That's fine.
Actually, this is what I'm going to do using triads.
Okay.
And this is how I think, just like you're talking about. If I play something like this, what I'm really thinking in there is this. There's the A.
Yeah.
There's the next one, the next one, the next one. If I'm going to go up here, I've got this,
Yeah.
this, this, and this.
Right.
Now, for the D chords, the same thing. It's move over I've got the triads to this one. But I'm going to add the seventh note. And I'm going to flat the 3 and bring it up with a little thing, little hammer-on or a slur.
Right.
So that I end up with this. Triad. Now to the G. To the 7th chord. Now the same triad but moved up. And then a turnaround. 3-note 7th chord. So the whole thing is really based on
Triads.
Yeah.
this one.
And inversions.
Yep.
And if I went up to D, I'd be playing up to this and played this stuff up here. There's the triad again. I'm playing this triad.
Yep.
That one, or maybe I might add the 7.
Yep.
So that's how I think in triads,
Yeah.
exactly as you're explaining.
Yes, indeed. Yes.
And all forms actually work over it. It's just how, in the case of the Mixolydian, but if you listen to people like Tuck Andrus, he plays jazz, but what you're listening to is he's playing these melodic lines over chord changes, just like we're doing with these blues, except he's adding 4-note chords and putting in some other things. But the voice leading, the top note, is the point I want to grab too. It's usually the melodic content is where the melody actually rests, is in the top note. And when you're looking at chords, especially ones that have more than 3 notes, and you see these crazy numbers, they're usually referring to, like if it's a 13 chord, it's the 13th note of the scale that's on top. That's on the keyboard's right-hand pinky, kind of a thing. That was my interjection for that moment.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so let me bring up another little point, because what you were talking about adding the flat 7 is actually, you know, what I'm pretty much arbitrarily deciding to replace the top note with the next note in the scale for these chords, right? Right. So that's a way to start because it's the most obvious one, right? You got the chord, you put a note, put a pinky or something down higher, you're adding another note. But once you understand how that works, then you start to go, wait a minute. I've got all these notes all around these chords on either direction. I can go all sorts of different angles from this starting chord and still see this chord as the core of it all. So one game I found for the blues, which was really useful, which was to take this.
What key are you in?
C. This is the
okay.
C. So we're back to C. So if I take G, A, and B flat, right?
Yeah.
That little real common bluesy thing.
Sure.
But then I said, all right, now I should learn where that is on each other one of these chord shapes. So in here, the G is low, so so I can play that lick down here.
Right.
And then in this, it's in the middle, right? So it's like. So you get that, and then
yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, see, so now you can bring out the mixolydian, that bluesy dominant flavor in everything. Yeah, and it's really easy to do, and it's a lot of fun.
Cool.
Yeah.
Do it in another key.
Pick a key, any key.
Do it in A. Because you got all the bass notes hanging out. Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
With triads.
Well, what that just reminded me of, we're adding notes. You can add, here's a triad in E. I got this from listening to Big Bill, but then I went over to listen to Clapton do a version of Big Bill.
Yep.
Oh, right.
And he did this. He said part of it was, and he played it in A. I'm going to do it in E.
You're talking about Key to the Highway?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We got a now augmented.
Yeah.
To minor.
Yeah.
To the 7th.
Yeah.
And the whole thing is happening with triads. It's an E triad. Now I'm just going to make it E augmented.
Yeah.
Now it's a C sharp minor.
Yeah.
And then we're going to make it a 3-note D7.
Yep.
So you could use this on
Use it anyway.
4 notes.
Nice.
Just using basically triad shapes.
That was reference to Big Bill Brunzi.
Yeah, he didn't actually do that one, but it's where it came from originally, you know.
Oh, nice. Nice.
And Big Bill didn't write that, by the way, but I don't know who wrote it, but it's an older song. But he made it like a big hit when he recorded it.
Huh.
And that's where Clapton, of course, got it from.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that recorded back in the 20s and 30s Key to the Highway, but Big Bill's version was the one.
The one that everybody chose out the best.
Yeah. Which, you know, we've mentioned this before, but the acoustic blues is really an improvisatory art or craft. And as I mentioned, there's all these recordings of Key to the Highway. Well, none of them are the same.
No.
Because all these guys, when they played, they improvised their own little licks and
even without improvisation, like if you listen to classical music and they're playing a lot of times the same tunes on this album as they're playing on this gentleman's album or this young lady's album, because both sexes are involved, and they're different. They're different versions because of the way someone just phrases it a little differently, and you know, the more astute you are to hearing those differences, the more you realize that no, there's more than one way to play it, but it's still the same way. I don't know if that makes sense to anybody.
It's the same but different.
Same but different, yeah.
Same but different, yeah. Another example of that is Scrapper Blackwell and Leroy Carr had a #1 hit called How Long Blues. It was so popular in the late 20s when they recorded it that the aluminum masters wore out. So they had to re-record it. It was sold on the Race Records label.
Right.
And they recorded it together 4 more times. And then Leroy Carr he played piano, Scrapper Blackwell was on guitar. Leroy Carr did it 1 more time, so they had 5 times they recorded it. And there's a nice little documentary on that, and all 5 tunes are there, and they're not even similar. You know, you know, Leroy plays some different licks. Scrapper's playing different. The chords are pretty much the same.
But they agreed on
different
something.
verses. Yeah. You know, little instrumental here and there that wasn't there in the last one. You know, they're obviously just improvising that tune at that time.
Right. They probably couldn't duplicate it if they tried.
Probably not, because we don't even remember what they played.
Yeah, what they played because they were improvising. You know, what did I say? You know?
So you see that all the time. And a lot of people try to do everything note for note, just like these artists.
Yeah, and then they didn't do
They
it either.
didn't do it that way, you know.
Hey, let's roll it out with a tune.
Right.
We got another 30 seconds.
Yeah.
You want to do some, want me to play these little...
Yeah, you want to do an A? We'll do an A.
He was doing it, I think, a C.
well,
You want to do a C? Okay.
Yeah, do C.
Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4... Oh, you're going to be playing the lead.
Well, thanks for listening and hope to see you soon.